So it's all about observation and seeing what happens, and more importantly, why it happens, and who are making people that are making those things happen. Whether it was my time at Laurel Creek when I first got there, or even now at Montclair when I got here, it doesn't necessarily make those people that aren't beating the drum the same way we are bad people, right? Doesn't make the job a bad job. It just makes them a bad fit. And what you really want is you want to make sure that we're all pushing on that great big boulder going in the same direction.
Welcome to Leadership on the Links, the podcast that showcases innovators in golf course management and the issues they face. I'm your host, Tyler Bloom. In Leadership on the Links, you hear the stories of people shaping the industry from their first swing to their dream match. You feel like you're on the course playing with your most inspiring colleagues, having great conversations, digging into insights and sharing a few laughs. Our industry is changing. As a leader, you need to keep up on everything from trends to technology to best practices. Together, we'll continue to build world-class clubs and teams. Let's get to it. Enjoy.
Well, super excited today to be joined. Really an interesting story is one of Meredith's former teammates and bosses in the industry. So you've got two people on here that you work with in totally different capacities. So we're going to corner you today, Meredith, and we're going to get you on the hot seat. But,
Me?
yes.
Did you guys do this before coming on? Why? All right, whatever. Hit me with it.
Yeah, Joel, well, appreciate you coming on here. And I know Meredith obviously had a lot of fantastic things to say at her time working with you. And it was great to finally put a face to a name at the PGA show. And then not too long after there at the CMA show, it was like, man.
Back to back. Yeah, back to back. Yeah, Meredith's great. Loved working with her, and you had it right the first time. We were definitely teammates, so it was a great time, and unfortunate for me that she decided to move on, but understand why. Yep.
Now you do.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
We'll get to that.
Talk to us, for those that don't know a little bit about you. Talk to us a little bit about yourself and your career journey.
Sure. Believe it or not, I didn't start out growing up saying I wanted to be a country club manager, general manager of a country club. I came to golf late in life, but that was really the doorway to the country club environment. I spent a lot of my time in the restaurants when I was younger because it was the easiest job to pick up and you get the most cash. And when you're young and kind of out in the world all by yourself, that's what you need is cash. So it just so happened that those two things kind of combined together after I got out of the military. Was going to be an architect. And when I was going to the community college I was going to, a buddy of mine said, "Hey, let's go play some golf." You hit a great shot and then you're hooked. It's like a disease. You can't play enough of it. So I spent the better part of my time going forward trying to get as good as I could at golf. And it kind of took me down that career path. I was going to be a golf professional. Moved south, and then just kind of the career unfolded, itself. Just different progressions at different places, and had the opportunity to kind of merge the two and work on more of the executive side versus just the golf side, and held the GM's role of a couple of different places. Obviously, the one Meredith and I worked together at Laurel Creek. I spent 14 years there. Really loved the run that I had there. It was great. And then, an opportunity up here at Montclair Golf Club opened up, and for me, it was kind of bittersweet to leave, but also a great opportunity for me to come up here and keep my saw sharp, work on the tools and the things that I think are important for a GM to have, and hopefully improve the Montclair experience for its members. So, been very fortunate to have the career I've had.
This is for me. I'm more fascinated with this now. I did not come up through the GM route, right? I was a superintendent, and when I was a superintendent, I always kind of thought maybe if I stayed in the industry, the pathway would be to a GM. De facto, I kind of have like that role now, and I don't envy you having to manage hundreds of employees, hundreds of members, but it's a real skill set. So, like, what gravitated you about the industry, about the role?
It's really hard to say. Once again, the passion really came from the environment that you're in, I guess. I feel like I don't work a day in my life. I love what I do. I love the interaction with the members. I love the interaction with the staff. I love the never really knowing what your day is going to unfold like until it actually unfolds. To me, that's exciting, and being able to react to those kind of things. You don't see a whole lot of superintendents going that route. They're kind of, the structure is, they kind of stay in that kind of vein. Golf pros, kind of similar. You don't see a whole lot of them transitioning for some reason or another. A lot of the GMs things really unfold more from the food and beverage side. And I think that might be mostly because, they're interacting, more with the general membership than even a golf pro might, because obviously, they're focused more on the golf side of it. But I love the interaction. I love just the day-to-day stuff that happens. And yeah, you have to have a kind of a broad skill set, but the key for all of this is, in running your own organization, it's not necessarily about what you do, it's about what you have your team, and how you support your team and what they do. That's the critical piece, really.
I appreciate that. Now you're putting me back on the hot spot. So I'm trying to do that every day, and it's a work in progress. Let's put it that way.
Sure it is. Yep. But that's the fun part. I mean, you're interacting with those people that you spend the most time with outside of your family, right? So they become kind of your secondary family, and you want to see them succeed, and you want them to be happy. So that's how I envision my role at whatever club I've been at, is how do I make their lives better, through with the things that we do here, because in making them happy, they in turn will obviously make the rest of the team happy, which will make the members happy. So.
And I think also, especially in the hospitality service industry, given the hours and what it takes from a visibility and just on-site standpoint, you're oftentimes spending more time with the with the
More waking time. Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
unless you create that balance, which I think you've always supported, the work life balance, one by example, and two through what you've incorporated from a team perspective, and taking the time to learn each individual personality who requires a different management style. Not everybody is cut and paste in terms of how you handle situations or conversations or decisions. And that's such a key piece from a management perspective, that taking the time to learn, and you're always going to learn, because your employees will surprise you in many different ways. But I've always admired that, especially working with you, because it was always.
I mean, it is. And I mean, I came up in an environment where it wasn't really so much structured that way when I came through the ranks. And I knew going up or growing through the system is that once I get to that certain level, I want to make sure, because I felt that would produce the best teams. And having the best team is really, I'm like a coach, right? I'm trying to put the best team on the field. Well, if I have disgruntled teams, they're not going to perform to that level. So always having that balance. And I know we'll kind of talk about it, but the dynamic of who you have on your team and all of those other things that are there. But it is truly a dynamic that I was cognizant of, and that I knew I wanted to kind of make sure happens when it became my show to run, and that we have that balance, because it is a tough work environment sometimes. And you're right. I say you spend more waking time with your work family than you do waking time typically with your home family, because, obviously you're sleeping at a certain point of time when you're together. But but once again, if you love what you do, it's not really work. So you don't mind. I don't mind the hours that I spend. Granted, it was tough sometimes, and other jobs were tougher than others. But now getting where we are now, it's hopefully starts to get a little bit easier.
Yeah, I'm sure we gave you a run for your money.
No, you guys were great. You guys
A time or two.
you guys were great. No, you guys were great. I walked into a really good environment there, and obviously there was some turnover and stuff, and that happens, And then once again, you mentioned it before, but kind of learning how each individual reacts, or what's important to them. And that's a super critical piece for any GM of any successful organization, is understanding the dynamics of that. It's not a cookie cutter kind of leadership role. You've got to be able to be more of like a chameleon and adjust as necessary.
Or therapist.
That helps too. Yep, that does help too.
Meredith plays those parts too within our organization for me.
So you've got a dual employee there for you then, right? You've got kind of a.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. There's many times I call her and I'm like, oh man, I'm going to call her to talk about something. Then I get into it. I'm like, it's more of like a therapy session for Tyler. They didn't realize that they were signing up.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. It's good that you got that.
Yeah. Well, I have 5 of them in different ways on my work family. So it's all good.
That's awesome.
One thing I admired as well is you were in a really good position prior to coming to Montclair. Like, you didn't need this. Like, this wasn't a challenge that you needed to do. Like, what drove you to make that change? Because I find so many people in their professional careers kind of hit a point where it's like, you know what? I don't need that I don't need to chase that. I'm in a good spot.
I guess, can you say I'm a masochist maybe? Um, no, it's funny because yeah, Laurel Creek was great, and I really loved my time there. I had a great team, really had it built kind of, and not that it's never, I'll call it easy. It's never really easy, but it's you can anticipate what's going on, and you kind of create these routines and things like that. And yeah, it was humming right along, and it was great. And talking with different people, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Greg Patterson. I'm sure you guys know who he is and familiar with him. And Greg and I used to communicate every once in a while when I had questions, or just because he became such a resource for me in regards to my career. He spent, what it was 30 years at at his club, and we talked about the different dynamic between going from job to job or kind of staying hunkered down in your own environment. And I kind of envisioned that's where my career path was going to end, was at Laurel Creek. I was going to stay there. But sometimes it's almost a challenge to yourself, right? So you feel like you've come in and helped create this great environment, and then you say, okay, well, was that a fluke, or is that something that you can repeat? So, coming up here and talking with the people at Montclair and kind of understanding what, where they were and what their needs were, I started thinking to myself, it would be a great opportunity for me really to keep my saw a little sharp and but also see if what I did there was a fluke or if I could really repeat the process again. And that's kind of a big driver of it. And, so having a conversation at the time with the board and then, with the department heads and some of the employees, I just felt, hey, this is going to be a great opportunity. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of work, but guess what? I love what I do, so it's not so bad. And I'm hopeful that I can kind of repeat that same process that I had at Laurel Creek here over a period of time. It didn't happen overnight at Laurel Creek. It was a years long process, but I think we're on the right steps here, similar to the way we were at Laurel Creek in the beginning stages. So yeah, I did it more because I felt I needed that challenge. I wanted to make sure that when I'm talking about culture and work life experience and things like that, that it's truly true in regards to just making sure that it wasn't just a one-off, that it was really something that really rings and resonates true. So,
and just for those listening, to give a perspective of the difference operationally, Laurel Creek to Montclair, because just for a little background, Joel and I, yes, we worked together for 5 years at Laurel Creek Country Club. I left Laurel Creek for an opportunity at Montclair Golf Club, which at the time they had just recently acquired Rock Spring, which is no longer the case. So circle, and for many of the same reasons, just the challenge, the, larger operation, so if you want to just give a little perspective of that. I mean, I call it a leap, just given the magnitude of the change. So just to give a little perspective on that.
It's a bigger, busier campus and environment. Laurel Creek was 18 holes, and yeah, we had a pool and a rackets program and things like that. Dining, did a renovation there during my time there and things like that. That renovation of the clubhouse. But coming here and seeing it's 36 holes, the rackets program is so much more, so much bigger. There's so many more members involved in it. The pool, the pool is great. Our pool is great. Built the splash pad and things like that, but it's really just it's a much busier club, and so getting a handle on all of that, much more staff involved in regards to how the club operates day to day. And so that was kind of, even still now, I'm nine months into it, even still now, just keeping my hands on it and trying to get kind of up to speed on how things go. Some days go by, lickety split, and all of a sudden it's like the day's over, time to go home or whatever. And they go, shoot, I feel like I hardly got anything done. So once again, it's fun to do. Really, the dynamic, it's like, whatever, AAA to, the MLB kind of thing. It's just a different environment.
And the banquet and private events and social calendars are comparable. Just different scales, maybe at different times.
They were, I think in regards to the different clubs, like I think Laurel Creek had a slightly larger banquet footprint because we had a slightly more functional ballroom space.
Got it.
Here you have kind of a lounge when you first walk in, so it's a little more challenging. They have weddings and things like that. And not that any club really wants to be a banquet facility, but obviously it's a great way to to run up a little bit of revenue. But no, just overall membership size is about the same, 900 members in both places when I finished Laurel Creek and coming up here. So that's a big healthy membership. So whether it's playing on 36 holes or 18 or whatever it was, it just seems to be a much busier place here, which is fun. Keep your day going. And yes, I'm following you around. So my next job will be with Tyler.
That's really funny.
But I will not be your therapist, Tyler. Sorry, I'll draw the line on that one.
I think he's out.
We have enough of those right now. It's really funny. Again, I give of credence to like re-architecting, not re-architecting, but kind of resetting like what your career looks like. As somebody who went from being a superintendent managing 20 to 25 people to a solopreneur to then in a very short time frame now have like a team. Yeah, there's a lot of like different shifts in that. Like
Mhm.
just purely from like a motivational standpoint, you kind of get comfortable into a routine, you start another routine, and then quickly realize, hey, there's other people here that I am responsible for, right? So as a GM, I think that that's such a, you've got to want that, like you've got to really want that, not just on the hospitality side, which I think a lot of times would actually be would be fun, but the responsibility of all those people. What inspired you in that aspect to lead people?
God, it's a great, good question. I don't think it necessarily inspired me. I think it's just kind of how everything unfolded for me. I was lucky enough to kind of, you apply yourself. I think if people apply themselves, they get rewarded for for their efforts. And it just, for me, it just worked out. An old boss of mine before I worked at Laurel Creek, one of his favorite sayings, relationships determine results. So taking that mantra and building those relationships with the people that you're around, whether that be employees or members or, for you, it'd be outside, contractors or whatever it is. I think the difference between like kind of what I'm doing and what you've done is um I know my paycheck is coming week to week, you know. I don't know if I could
Don't
take
say
that leap.
that. Somebody else here on the line.
Well, no, well, but you know how it is. You're running your own business now, so it's entirely dependent upon kind of you. Whereas here, I know my paycheck will come. Hopefully, I do a good enough job where I keep getting one week to week. But I don't have to. I don't have that stress or that pressure in regards to making sure that, oh my gosh, if I don't do X, Y, and Z, then I have other people that, may or may not be able to feed their families. Not saying they won't, just saying.
Just
Well,
saying.
yeah,
Just
well,
saying.
I'm just thinking here today, like, wow, thanks for throwing that at me on a.
Yeah, no pressure, no pressure. I know you got it under control.
Yeah, no, it's interesting too because I think a lot of friends of mine will ask me, what was that leap like? Be honest with you, looking back, it wasn't even a risk. I didn't even think of it as a risk. I looked at it as
Kudos, man.
like,
Kudos. That's good.
why wouldn't I do that? On the flip side of that now, because I'm more self-aware, I'm thinking, shit, I took a risk here. Like
Yes, you did.
there's a little bit more to it than just that. But no, I don't know. It's been an interesting journey. And I mean, even the Meredith's perspective, I mean, like going from what you just said is like a steady, you can walk into a work environment, there's policies in place, there's teams in place. And yes, there's some fine tuning of that, but a lot of that foundation is already set versus jumping into, there is no blueprint. Like there is no playbook. Like we have to define the playbook. And that's one thing that makes it exciting with what we do. But it also is for sure a huge challenge is that every day is a different day, but like you have the opportunity to kind of define that because
Mhm.
there's no playbook. There is no governance. I say that
Right.
there's no governance, but there's not that same feeling as at a club.
And there's also not the limitations that you're going to get along the same lines, right? And you kind of have limitless. You can grow as big as you want. You're not kind of stuck in a structure based upon like a club is. It's not like I'm going to be able to double the club in size. It is what it is. But whereas you have a kind of an open playbook, you can expand as much as big as you'd like.
Yes, we're still figuring that out
True.
week to week, hour by hour.
Knowing you came into
That's okay. That's okay. Learning is good.
operationally, coming into the team perspective and, just probably if I know you, a lot of observation to start, which I think any, especially in a leadership role, you're observing, kind of like absorbing at the same time. And if making any changes, adjustments from a staffing team talent perspective, where would you like, what are the avenues that are what you look for in terms of where and characteristics? Like what type of things do you look for when you're placing, and is that per position or is it a individual?
Okay. Well, I think what you're kind of asking more like kind of when I look and evaluate my team or evaluate where I am,
Yeah.
kind of how do I know what fits and who's going to be successful or not? Kind of
Yeah.
like you mentioned. Yeah, like you mentioned, like you have two eyes and two ears and only one mouth for a reason. You watch and you listen and you talk a little bit less than those two things if you're going to be successful. At least that's what I've always found out. So, but when it comes to like coming into a new environment like Montclair, right? Absolutely, it's all about observation and seeing what happens, and more importantly, why it happens, and who are the people that are making those things happen. We did it at Laurel Creek. I've done it here now at Montclair as well. But um, I believe that you'll see the most successful organizations, and that's kind of what you're trying to drive at, right? Is when you're talking about evaluating teams and people individually, right? Kind of a common core belief system. We've all got to kind of be beating on the same drum or marching in the same direction. And unfortunately, sometimes that isn't the case, whether whether it was my time at Laurel Creek when I first got there, or even now at Montclair when I got here. It doesn't necessarily make those people that aren't beating the drum the same way we are bad people, right? Doesn't make the job a bad job. It just makes them a bad fit. And what you really want is you want to make sure that we're all pushing on that great big boulder going in the same direction. And so, yeah, you evaluate and you build those relationships. You start to build those relationships. That's who they are. I'm on the baseball team the same as they are. If they aren't successful, neither am I. But you do that. You evaluate them and you watch them and you say, okay, how are they? Do they believe what I think we need to believe in to be successful? And do they just not necessarily have the right skill set, or have they not been coached in the right way? And then you kind of take that period of time and you evaluate them. At some point, you'll come to a decision. Yes, they're going to be on the team, or maybe we need to part ways. Never an easy thing to do, and it's never a fun thing to do. But part of our relationship, mine as a GM or anybody who's working here or at any other club, part of their responsibility is to that club and making sure that they're doing what's best for that club. So,
Yeah.
You've experienced it in what you do and how you operate in the places you've worked. It's whether it's the GM or whether it's someone else who's coming on board, right? They've got to fit into the fabric of the culture of the organization, or it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It's always a conflict. There's always things that aren't going right, and you can usually pinpoint it back down to that. So, I got lucky. You joined Laurel Creek right before I did, but we always saw things similarly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then me as a first-time manager of individuals, I had my work cut out for me.
You did great. You always did great.
It's not easy. Thank you. Thank you. It's just, I felt like a when looking back, I'm like, I was a baby, but you got to rip the Band-Aid off.
And honestly, a lot of times that's the fastest, how it is. It's the fastest way you learn, right?
Absolutely.
When you have to kind of that gut reaction of how things are supposed to operate and how we get to where we're trying to go. And then the other pieces you pick up as you go along. I can promise you, my first GM's job, I was horrific. Thank God I had an ownership structure that kind of helped guide me along and things like that. But I look back now and I wasn't ready to run a club at that point in time in my career, but I did it. And learned from it. And same thing as, I'm sure Tyler, same as you and your responsibilities. A lot of it you learn as you go along, And I think that's the big challenge of what we see now. And, and with the new people coming in, you can talk about it, whether it be in regards to executive chefs or whatever, or any other position, the people coming on board now, they think they're coming right out of college and they're going to be like the top person.
That is a major issue.
No, that's not really how it works all the time. You've got to learn in between that and that,
Yeah. There's a real major issue with that right now. And I hear this word entitlement quite often thrown around, that, the younger generation's entitled and they haven't really earned their stripes. And as a young professional myself, I think how many times I tried to fast track to get to that next title, to get to that next role, and really probably taking some time and some patience and really like mastering the craft would have been better. But I'll tell you what, on the same token now, it's a firestorm. It's a firestorm all the time. Like there's nothing that can prepare you to being a business owner. Meredith deals with the same thing, on her end too. Like there's nothing that prepares you for it other than just like, hey, 2 feet in, let's freaking get her done.
Yep. Yeah. Both of you guys have done things that I haven't done. You both started your own businesses. I've never done that. I don't know if I have the fortitude to do that. So, kudos to the both of you.
Yeah, it's a wild dynamic. I haven't had a team, and Tyler obviously started as not having a team either. But then when that progresses, which is a good thing, that's, ultimately you want to go on the upward trajectory. But yeah, it's a different way of thinking. because it's, at the end of the day, it falls on you. But
Yep.
but I will say, you, Joel, and you take that, I don't want to say bullet, but you almost take that bullet on behalf of the team anyway. You
Oh,
are not
sure.
necessarily the owner per se, but you always, you've always been like, I'm going to go to bat. It'll stop with me and we'll handle it, internally if and when within the team before going beyond that. So I feel like that's very similar in terms of the responsibility that you just take on as in that
That's the
position.
ownership part of it, right? So,
Yeah.
right. So I don't own Montclair Golf Club, but I treat it as if it's mine because I would want it to be as successful as it could possibly be. And part of that is, with the team. So for sure. But once again, it is different, what you guys have accomplished. But, yeah, I mean, I think it's like that with anybody who wants to really be successful. You have to be able to, and I think part of that is when you build that team is build that trust with them so that they'll follow you where you want to go. Right. So,
Sure. I think about this in terms of in that leadership position in any capacity. It could be, top level, mid level, lower level club, regardless. I would ask you what for yourself from a I guess personal and professional, because I look at them, they run parallel development
mhm.
standpoint. What do you do for yourself, whether that's books,
Mhm.
classes, like what do you lean on to, you know, stay ahead of the curve or whatever, you learn more.
Sure.
Let's just put it that way.
Sure. Well, I mean, obviously, lucky enough being part of club management. Obviously, there's the CMAA, and World Conference is always very important for me to attend to because I think it gives you some great insights to some of the other things that are going out there. No different than the PGA show and the PGA of America. Once again, being a PGA professional as well, those are always important. There's always continuing education you can take, and there's things like that. But I mean, you mentioned books. I always like to try and read a book. We used to read a book every year in the team when we were at Laurel Creek, and we're doing it here at Montclair as well because I think curiosity is really important. I think in wanting to learn and get better each day is important. Podcasts. I have a pretty big commute right now, a couple days a week, so I spend my hour and a half to 2 hours each way listening to podcasts and just ebooks are really big too. Audiobooks are big. To me, you can never learn enough, right? No matter how much we all think we know, there's always something out there that may just make your life a little bit easier if you just spend the time, to find out what that is and be curious enough to go looking for it. So,
And
yeah.
and I'm curious, what book is the team
Oh
reading now?
gosh. Well, we just did emotional EQ because when I got here,
Yeah.
I thought that was probably the most pertinent one that this group needed. You were involved with the 7 Habits of Highly
Mhm.
Effective People at Laurel Creek, so that'll be on the docket for our next downtime here at Montclair. I just think that book is just incredible in regards to not even just business wise, but even personal wise. Your own life and how you live and things like that. So, but
Yeah, and I go back to that because I feel like, for example, how much time you spend, within your profession,
mhm,
they almost have to run parallel.
they do.
In terms of what you want out of yourself,
Mhm.
you hope is reflected,
Yeah,
work that you do and the service you
for
provide,
sure.
whatever that may look
Yeah.
like.
And
Um,
Jeff McFadden made a great comment one time. He mentioned about it's a work-life balance, but it's really work-life integration because you are running congruent at the same place at the same time and trying to handle both things. So versus calling it a balance, it is an integration. So it was a great way of really kind of looking at it. So how one thing affects the other, whether it's something you're improving in your personal life will help you in your work life or vice versa.
I love that because I feel
Yeah.
like we've had so many recent conversations, and I, of course, refer to it as, and have even in this episode, to
hmm
work-life balance, but it truly is.
It's an
And
integration. It's not an
yeah,
either or,
yeah.
right?
And it was something that we've touched on, I feel like is just the hot topic and, not to spend too much time, but we had
Mhm.
talked about in a prior episode, the integration of AI in the
Oh yeah.
workplace. Um, and it, luckily for us, you cannot replace that, face-to-face interaction. But I would be curious because it could be intimidating for somebody that maybe wants to break into the hospitality industry and looking like those off-peak hours or whatever that looks like, that they're not sure if that's something that they want to do, but they really love the possible pathway, right? Would you recommend, or have you guys integrated, whether, now or prior, AI in any capacity?
Sure. Yeah, we're actually in the process of kind of going through that now with Copilot. Obviously, I've used ChatGPT and things like that, but really Copilot, I think, is going to be kind of more the platform that we kind of gravitate towards, mainly because it's all part of Outlook and things like that, and it will help. You talk about AI and what are the benefits of really AI or technology, and to me, the benefits are the one thing we can't make more of, and that's time. We only have a certain amount of time, right? Every day, we don't have so much time to do the things that we do, and if AI can then in turn kind of free up a lot of the time that we're using, just how it's structured. It improves the maybe not so important tasks, or maybe they're important, and they just draw a lot of time. It frees up our time to do the other things. And going back to, why people join clubs and things like that, it's that social interaction piece and being able to get out in front of it and stay up there and talk with members and staff and things like that. So AI will definitely be a big piece going forward. Clubs are inherently unruly and unwieldy, right? They're tough to kind of move around. They're not a nimble little organization, so it'll take some time, and it won't happen overnight, but I think you'll definitely see a big change in the upcoming years in regards to technology and AI in particular.
I would agree. And, not only the face-to-face interaction, especially from the clubhouse perspective, but even on the agronomy side, the investment in autonomous mowers or whatever that looks like, for dependent on the operation, being able to then put the time into those details and the things that may unfortunately fall to the bottom of the list that require physical hands-on time. There's ways to look at it in that capacity too.
But even like in your business, I mean, what can't you create more of? So when you're looking at what your priorities are, well, I need to kind of do all of these things to kind of set me up. Well, if a lot of those things can be tackled without you actually having to do them, AI can do it, things like that. That frees you up to go out and look for new business or whatever else is you need to do, and no different than here at the club, So
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we're integrating it here and there. Really, gosh, if Tyler could speak on it even offline a bit, he's to the point of, has something that if a Zoom call comes in, or you have a Zoom call, something like this, you click X, it takes this, or review your email, the notes, and then put them into a task taker. Talk about time saved, or
it's amazing.
Email, especially somebody like you probably get 100 emails a day. Prioritizing that, it's little things that I think, especially from the private club side of things, is finding the balance between like tradition and trend. And I don't want to say it's a trend, because I don't think it's going to be a trend. It's going to be here for.
Well, but that's how everything that becomes in a tradition was a trend at one point and now has become tradition. But for sure,
It's true. And it all depends on the dynamic of your either club ownership, your board, whatever that looks like. Because at the end of the day, sometimes they have the last call on certain things.
They have the last say on what happens or doesn't happen, for sure. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't know if Tyler's going to join us back, but I, would love to just get an idea of before we wrap up, what's next at Montclair?
Oh gosh.
I know what's not next, because I think the last talked, I mean, I know that there's master plan progress happening, but tell us, what's new and exciting.
Sure. This summer upcoming, we have the women's USGA Mid-Am. Very excited for that national championship coming to Montclair. We're excited for that. Had some great meetings and also a great little kickoff party a few weeks ago for it. Just love that stuff. Obviously, being a golf pro, just love that stuff. Also working with the McMahon Group, to work on our facilities, and to me, that's a big piece of it, right? So, begin with the end in mind. Once again, going back to the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? Begin with the end in mind. Well, we need to kind of know where we're headed. And right now, they don't really have a great grasp on what that is. So the McMahon is going to help us kind of help with that. But for me, my big push right now, for at least for the next probably 12 months, is development of the team, and making sure that I'm here for them and they understand that, if they need something that, my job is to get that for them and to support them and to make sure that they have what they need and that if, therefore their teams have what they need. So I'm no different than what it was at Laurel Creek my first couple years there, You walk in and everyone has faith you're going to do the job. And then over the course of time, you end up building the trust so that they trust you and they know you're going to do the job, right? So no different than, I'm sure when you were working with Tyler and things like that. So,
Well, I would say you were the perfect person for that, for that
thank you.
operation.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Let's hope you're not wrong.
Knowing it, firsthand, because I know it's, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving people. I mean, it's a buzz. It's a buzz up there. But, well, I'd be, if you guys are looking for, like volunteer opportunities or anything for the upcoming tournaments,
Absolutely.
keep us in mind. I can also reach out to Mr. Campbell or the team.
Absolutely.
And
Yep,
see
for sure.
we can do on, especially the agronomy side, because obviously a lot.
We're going to need help with
Yeah.
that. A lot happens the week of and the week prior. So yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Mhm.
yes. Now, is there any questions for us and, don't feel pressured, but if there's anything that,
Well, part of for me is, understanding kind of in regards, especially what Tyler does, kind of being a part of the search firm and things like that, and understanding kind of when he's looking at, let's call them candidates or potential candidates, what are the important things that he's looking for when it comes to those candidates? I know we talked about earlier about the sense of kind of entitlement piece of it, but really aside from that, like how does he go about assessing the talent of those people? Because I know, same as I do, that's always going to be a challenge for any work environment is talent. Where are these next people coming from? What are their expectations? So didn't know if he had any or you had any colorful insight on that.
Yeah, and again, another conversation to take offline, but I know from the way, when we embark on a search on behalf of a club, it's getting the answers to what they truly, truly want as far in advance as possible. What and who, what type of, and we have a thorough intake form questionnaire that, in addition to one-on-one conversations, to really get to the root of what their operation needs, whether it's, just from an agronomy standpoint, depending on the position, right? But at the end of the day, really getting an idea. And then, our database is huge. And obviously the network is huge, especially from the agronomy side. We know personally a lot of these, individuals, whether they were up for other jobs and just, like you said, personality does from one perspective, but of course, skill set and experience. But there he is. Tyler, did you hear that? Were you listening?
I just got back in.
Okay. Just a quick recap of how you go about evaluating the appropriate talent or candidate pool for a job. And I was just saying, we obviously have intake form and conversations, but getting to the root of really what the operation needs and is looking for as far in advance in the search or, to the start of the search, so you don't get through it and then things change. Just getting as much of that up front is very important.
It's interesting. We're in real time for an AIT search right now, actually, with Montclair. And what's really hard is that pool doesn't exist. You're trying to pull a rabbit out of your hat. And especially in that market, just that metro market is really, really hard for whatever reason to get that level of individual engagement. I think that's probably across all the different club sectors. So I think for what we look for and try to work with in front is get to learn the employer. You get to learn what their tendencies are, what their personality is, what their non-negotiables are, as much as you can. But ultimately, I find, at the different tiers of at the different tiers of roles, at that foundational level, a lot of times it's ambition. How do they show up? How do they present? How do they communicate? Right? I use this word a lot, but do they give a shit? Do they care? Do they care about this as a career? Right? And then as you kind of move up that chain, now it starts to be what's their motivators? What's their drivers? What keeps them engaged? What is some of their performance tendencies? What are some of their results? And then as you get to the executive level, it's interesting. I was on a call yesterday with a friend who works for Corn Ferry, and she does a lot of talent development, a lot of programming for all their like global search. And we got into a discussion about success profiles. And she's a member at a private club and was asking me, how do you go about in these executive searches, with developing success? And I said, it's really interesting because the people we're trying to get perspective from often don't have any clue what they're looking for. They're volunteer members. And I said,
Right.
"So, you really try to rely on the general manager and the director of golf based off their experiences a lot of times to try to characterize that success." But yeah, Meredith, back to your point, the sooner and clearer you can get that up front, you will eliminate a lot of headaches.
So do you see people when they're talking to you about kind of what you're talking about, trying to analyze what they need? Do they ever really talk about kind of what their culture is in regards to the organization itself? And
I think when we left off, we were talking about, you asked, how do you try to embed culture as part of like the evaluation process?
right.
Is that
Yep.
right?
Yes.
I
Sure.
think it's pretty important because I mean that in of itself is going to determine the success of the candidate. And so I think you've got to really try to like understand those characteristics so you can pressure test them beyond like technical skills. So I think it's pretty important.
Hmm. Yeah, I didn't know if kind of that was the way kind of people are shifting more towards, because a lot of times, I mean, the skill set you want someone to have, you can always teach them that. But if they don't believe the things you believe in, you mentioned about, do they give a shit kind of thing like that? You got to ask the pertinent questions to figure out exactly to what level and things. So that's because that's teaching the staff here, training the staff here. That's the important part, is who you bring on the bus. What they do is something our job is to show them what they need to do and how we want them to do it and the standards that are built around that. But when it comes to me, the number one thing is culture. They have to believe in the things that we believe in. So I should know if you saw that kind of as you're doing the searches and things like that, if that's really become a bigger push or if it's still the same thing. Well, I want the assistant superintendent that worked at Pine Valley because they worked at Pine Valley.
Right. I will say though, in terms of like, I mean, obviously our main, the executive search side, but from the business consulting side of things, assisting, especially like department heads and things like that in developing
Mhm.
that. If you're finding, or we're finding that it is maybe one of those like gray areas, or they could really use that consulting to help them get there. That is something that, that we do as well in different, depending on who and what and where. But it's so important because it saves you a headache in the long run, ideally.
if if they don't fit culturally, it doesn't make a difference how talented they are.
Yes.
They're not going to be successful. Yeah. Yep. For sure.
One little add on to that too is I think, and again in clubs and situations in regions like yours where you've got a lot of clubs all fighting for the same pool of talent, I
Yeah.
do find that some of the best clubs we work with have really like honed in on that internal development of really looking at current staff that maybe doesn't have a 2-year, 4-year degree, but like they're really prideful of being an employee there and trying to raise their profile up and giving them skills and education. We see more and more clubs doing that. And I was a big proponent of that, like when I was a superintendent, because we just didn't have access to like those kind of candidates. So you just kind of had to make
Mhm.
the best with what you had. And you got a big facility too. So like it's hard enough to staff an 18-hole facility, 27 holes, and that level of club.
Yeah.
Like it requires extra bodies.
36.
36 and in no tee times and start on any nine you want. And yeah, there's some real uniqueness to Montclair that you don't see.
Four nines, right? It's
Four
four nines,
nines. You start on
not
four
That's
nines,
right.
correct.
not
Yep.
two 18s.
Yeah.
You're
That's
not
I
to
don't know
18,
why.
so you can start on any nine you want. Yeah, it becomes challenging. And along those lines, developing those people that are there so that they can in turn take their next step in their career. I think that's a very, very important part, whether it be for my responsibility or any of my department heads. Yeah.
This is a question for you. I'm curious your perspective on this, and I find myself in this discussion a lot. And when it comes to recruiting, employers will come and they'll have kind of an idea of, let's say, comp profile that they're looking for, right? And a lot of times that's already built in because of the institution, right? And so the employer will come and say, here's what we can offer for X. And oftentimes now I'm finding myself saying, well, we're not the right fit for you, because I can tell you the candidate pool is not going to accept that for those experiences, right? But as an
For sure.
employer, like as an employer for yourself, like when you engage, whether it's with recruiting firm, different consulting firm, like does that advice help you? Or does that just like kind of piss you off because you're like, all right, man, I'm coming to you for solutions and you're telling me that we're not doing enough. And it's a hard, it's not easy on, let's say, on our side at times to tell employers that. Like, we don't want to
Sure.
tell them that. Like, we certainly don't want to do that. But I feel like on the same token, if they're asking for help, maybe part of that help is just telling them that.
For sure. For someone like me, I would rather know whether or not I'm going to be competitive in the marketplace, right? Unfortunately, what other people do is they kind of put the cart in front of the horse and they say, well, I'm only going to pay X. Well, X will only get you 2/3 of what you're really asking for. So what's really important? Is it the position and the person, or is it making sure that you don't exceed your budget by X amount of dollars? And to me, I'm trying to educate them in regards to, you're going to have to pay a certain amount for the talent that you want, right? Because if you're not doing it, someone else is. So for me, someone like yourself or one of the other search firms, whoever it is, and there's other consultants, obviously out there through the PGA of America, whatever, getting a comp set of what is the asking price of what you want. I mean, you've got to start with that, right? Because if you don't, if I say, hey, listen, I'm only going to pay whatever that number is, and that won't even sniff the market, then I'm setting you up for failure. And then in turn, if you're not telling me the truth about it, it's not going to be a good relationship, right? So, yeah, sometimes it's a hard truth, and a lot of times people don't want to hear it because they think, "Oh, but they'll be working for us here at wherever this club is." Well, that may all be great and fine, but then they still got to feed the family. They still have to have that life integration and be able to live the life they want based upon that. And if the salary isn't commensurate with what the marketplace will bear, everyone loses. Everyone loses. I mean, for me, I would rather know ahead of time. I'd rather have you say, Joel, the comp set you put out there, I'm not going to get anything. You've got to bump it up by 20% or 30%. You've got to find us money if you really want someone who's going to come along and help your team.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's also a play where there's also an angle of, for that level of position, maybe we need to redefine what success looks like in that role, which I think that's a large part of what we've seen is like successes looks a lot different than it did 5, 10 years ago. And those candidate qualifications look a lot different than they did 5, 10 years ago. Shoot, I
Sure.
just went through that with a, with a larger general manager search where that was exactly the case of like the numbers that you think fit are outdated,
Right.
and you're just going to get different. That's fine if that's the number you can get to, but then this is
Yeah.
what you're going to get in qualifications.
Right, for sure. But even like a GM search or a superintendent search, whatever it is, right? They're basing it potentially on what was currently there, and there might be a reason why then that relationship soured and failed, and that person either moved on or you moved on from them, is because there was things weren't synergized, right? So whether that be compensation or whatever, so you're going to go back to the marketplace in the same kind of model that you currently have, even though that model is a 10-year-old model and things are much more advanced than what they are now, and so is the pay scale accordingly. So once again, you're not really setting anybody up for success by trying to say, I'm only going to pay X for this job because this is what I think is appropriate. Now, I might have a little bit different knowledge of it because I can do background checks. But if the board is dictating a certain salary range because this is what we used to pay our old superintendent, and because I'm getting somebody new, I don't want to pay that much. I want to pay a little bit less. But you have assistant superintendents making more than what's currently published for that job. You won't get anybody. Once again, understanding kind of where you currently stand, is important.
I feel like we covered a lot of topics. Meredith, did I miss anything?
No, this was awesome.
It was fun.
Really appreciate you taking the time, and no, it's not the last. Oh, I'll see you in a couple weeks anyway.
See the whole thing.
Yeah, and I'll stop by.
Please
First.
do. Please do. Well,
Well,
I appreciate you guys inviting me and having me on your podcast. It was a lot of fun. Hopefully it wasn't too disastrous with me losing connection, but
No, not at all.
hey,
All right, very
we had a few of those things here, and I said to Meredith before you jumped on, I was like, I feel like I'm a student here listening. I've got big shoes to fill, man. I appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you.
Thanks, guys. I really, really appreciate your time.
All right, we'll catch up soon.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Leadership on the Links. For more leadership insights and industry expertise, connect with us at bloomgolfpartners.com
or follow us on social media sites LinkedIn and Instagram. If you enjoyed this episode of Leadership on the Links, we'd be thrilled if you'd leave a review or share it with someone who you know would get some value. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to stay updated. Thanks for joining us today.